Growing up, I always knew my place in the family. I wasn't the favorite. That title belonged to Ethan, my older brother. He was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong. My mom doted on him like he was royalty, and my dad, he saw him as the future of our family name. And me, I was the afterthought, the backup plan, the reliable one, the one expected to pick up the slack and make sacrifices, all while smiling and nodding like I was fine with it. I don't think I really noticed it at first. As a kid, you just assume that's how things are. But as I got older, the pattern became impossible to ignore. Ethan got the newest clothes, the best tutors, and all expenses paid summer trips to Europe. Me, I got lectures on hard work and independence. At 16, while Ethan was packing for his Paris getaway, I was flipping burgers at a rundown roadside diner to save up for college. I brought it up once, just once. I asked my parents why Ethan didn't have to get a job, why everything was always handed to him while I had to scrape by. My mom sighed dramatically and said, "Rachel, you need to understand priorities." Translation: Ethan's future mattered. Mine didn't. I wasn't bitter. Not at first, anyway. I figured maybe that's just how parents worked. They invested in the kid they believed had the best chance. And the other one? Well, they learned to fend for themselves. So I did. While Ethan breezed through life without a care, I worked my ass off. I put myself through college, sharing tiny apartments with roommates who never paid rent on time. I skipped nights out, every paycheck carefully stashed away, because I knew one thing for sure: no one was coming to save me if I fell. After graduation, I had two choices: grind away at a low-paying job, or take a risk. So I bet on myself. I took every dollar I had and opened a small auto repair shop. It wasn't glamorous, and the first year nearly killed me. Long nights, weekends spent elbow deep in grease, a constant fear that I was one bad month away from losing everything. But I made it work. 5 years later, my shop was thriving. I was making real money, enough to finally start thinking about buying my own place instead of wasting cash on rent. It felt surreal, like I had actually built something for myself, something that no one could take away. Of course, that was before I realized my parents had other plans. Plans that didn't involve me having anything of my own. Owning a business wasn't easy, but it was mine. Every morning, I opened the garage doors to my shop, inhaled the scent of motor oil and steel, and reminded myself that I had built this from the ground up. No handouts, no shortcuts, just me, my tools, and years of hard work. My parents knew how much this meant to me. I had mentioned it enough times, how I was saving, how I wanted a place to call my own. And every time, the conversation somehow twisted in the same direction. "Ethan has been struggling so much, Rachel," my mom would say, voice dripping with concern. "Rent is outrageous these days, Jonathan," my father would add, shaking his head. They never outright asked me to help him, not yet, but the implication was always there, lingering in the air like an unspoken agreement they assumed I'd sign off on. After all, I was the responsible one, wasn't I? The one who always handled things? At first, I didn't think much of it. Sure, Ethan had never been good with money, but he'd always find a way, right? It wasn't my problem. Then I started noticing little things, like how my mom suddenly had a new designer handbag, like how my dad, who always claimed money was tight, showed up with a brand new watch, like how, despite constantly struggling, Ethan somehow managed weekend getaways, expensive takeout, and the latest gaming console. And then, one day, it all clicked. It was my money. Over the years, I had given my parents financial help whenever they needed it. Home repairs, unexpected bills, a little extra cash when things got tight. And I didn't mind because they were my parents, because I thought I was helping them. But I wasn't. I was funding Ethan's lifestyle. That realization stung, but it was nothing compared to what I overheard next. One afternoon, I stopped by my parents' house to drop something off. I wasn't planning to stay long, but as I walked past the kitchen, I heard my name. "Rachel's been saving for years," my mom said, her voice light, like they were discussing the weather. "She's responsible," my dad agreed. "She knows how to handle money. It only makes sense." I froze. My stomach twisted. She can't expect Ethan to struggle. He's her brother. I stood there, gripping my keys so hard. My knuckles went white as the truth settled in. They had a plan where I, without ever being asked, would buy a house, not for me, for Ethan. And the worst part? They assumed I'd go along with it, like it was obvious, like it was my duty. For the first time in my life, I saw things with perfect clarity. This wasn't about fairness. It wasn't even about family. I was just a resource to be tapped into when needed. I walked out of that house without saying a word. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling of my tiny apartment, listening to the flickering kitchen light. I still hadn't gotten around to fixing. I thought about every time I had been told to wait my turn, every sacrifice I had made, every time I had swallowed my frustration and smiled. And I thought about Ethan. Would he be embarrassed if he knew what they were planning? Grateful? Or would he just assume it was his right? I got my answer the next morning. Ethan called, out of nowhere, his voice practically vibrating with excitement. "Rachel, I found the perfect place." I didn't respond. 3 bedrooms, a backyard. I can finally move out. I waited for him to say the part that mattered, the part where he told me his plan to afford it. But he didn't, because he didn't need one. In his mind, this was already settled. My parents had made sure of that. And then just to twist the knife a little deeper, he actually had the audacity to say, "Don't worry. If you ever need a place to stay, you can crash in the guest room." That was it. That was the moment I knew. I wasn't playing along anymore. The next morning, I woke up with a plan. Not the kind of plan my parents had in mind. I was going to do exactly what they expected me to do. I was going to buy a house, just not for Ethan. I didn't say a word to anyone. No grand announcement, no dramatic confrontation. I just found a place I loved, signed the papers, and put down the deposit. It wasn't massive, but it was perfect for me. A cozy little house with a garage, big enough to park my car and have some workspace. The first thing in my life that was truly mine. I thought I had time before anyone found out. Maybe a few months, maybe even a year. I was wrong. 1 week after closing, my phone started blowing up. Missed calls, texts, voicemails. My mom, my dad, Ethan, even extended relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. And then I saw the message that made my stomach drop. "Why did we hear from the realtor that you bought a house?" My pulse spiked. How the hell did they find out? Maybe the agent had mentioned something to someone. Maybe Ethan had been looking at the same listings. It didn't matter. What mattered was that I had made my move. And now, the real battle was about to begin. That night, I ignored every call, every message. I wasn't about to get dragged into a conversation where they twisted everything into me being the bad guy. Instead, I focused on setting up my place, peeling off the ridiculous laugh, love stickers the previous owner had left in the kitchen. Then, the doorbell rang. I didn't even have to look. I knew who it was. Taking a deep breath, I opened the door. My parents stood there, looking less like loving family and more like corporate executives ready to discuss a breach of contract. My mom's face was a perfect mix of disappointment and hurt, the kind of look she used to give me when I forgot to call home. My dad? He stood with his arms crossed, jaw tight. Behind them, Ethan lingered on the front steps, hands in his pockets, staring at me like I'd just stolen something from him. I braced myself. "Rachel," my mom started, voice heavy with manufactured sorrow. "How could you do this?" I said nothing. "We were counting on you," my dad added, shaking his head. "You knew how much Ethan needed this." Ethan needed this? The same Ethan who had never paid rent a day in his life? Who still had my parents covering his credit card bills? I could feel my patience wearing thin. "We're family," my mom pressed, shifting tactics. Families take care of each other. And there it was, the guilt trip, the carefully crafted script designed to make me feel selfish, ungrateful. I had heard it all before. "After everything we've done for you," my dad added, throwing in the final blow. "This is how you repay us?" I almost laughed. Everything they'd done for me? Like making me pay rent as a teenager? Like expecting me to fund my own education while they financed Ethan's weekend getaways? If anything, I had repaid them 10 times over. I let them talk. I let them unload every argument, every accusation. And when they finally ran out of steam, my mom took a deep breath and delivered the ultimatum. "You have 2 choices," she said, her voice calm, like she was offering a business deal. "Transfer the house to Ethan." I stared at her. "Or be cut off." Silence. A cold, stretching silence. And then against every logical reaction, I almost laughed. Cut off? Cut off from what? The same love and support that always came with conditions? The same family that had never offered me anything without expecting twice as much in return? I exhaled slowly, keeping my voice steady. "I'll think about it. Not because I actually would, but because I wanted them out of my house." They left looking victorious, like they had just cornered me into submission. I watched them go, my heartbeat steady. Then I walked into my kitchen, grabbed a beer from the fridge, and sat down at my new table. My phone buzzed again, more missed calls, more messages, one from Ethan. I already knew what it would say. Something about me ruining his life. Something about how he had counted on me. But when I opened the message, I saw something else. A message from him, but it wasn't meant for me. It had been sent to our family group chat by accident. I froze. It was a detailed plan, a plan about how he and my parents were going to break me down, how they would keep up the pressure until I caved and handed over the house. There it was, plain as day. Confirmation that none of this was about family. None of this was about fairness. It was a coordinated takedown, and I was just the idiot who was supposed to roll over. I took a screenshot, saved it, and just sat there for a minute, staring at the screen. For the first time in years, I felt something shift. Not anger, not sadness, just clarity. They had never seen me as family. I was just a resource, a tool. And that was the moment I made my decision. I wasn't going to argue. I wasn't going to explain myself. I was just going to show them exactly how done I was. By the next morning, I had a plan. If my family wanted a battle, they were going to get one, but on my terms. I wasn't going to argue. I wasn't going to explain myself. I was just going to make it impossible for them to manipulate me ever again. The first thing I did was lock everything down. I called my bank, double-checked that no one but me could access my accounts. I updated my passwords, secured all my important documents, and even installed security cameras around my property just in case. Knowing my family, I wouldn't put it past them to pull something desperate. Then, I reached out to a lawyer. Could they actually take legal action against me? I asked, laying everything out. The lawyer barely held back his amusement. As long as everything is in your name and you haven't signed anything for Ethan, you have nothing to worry about. That was good news, but I still wasn't taking any risks. Later that day, I got a text from Ethan. I'm willing to talk, but only if you're ready to make things right. I ignored it. A few hours later, another message, this time from my mom. We're worried about you, Rachel. Let's have a family dinner and talk about this. Yeah, right. I wasn't falling for that trap. They weren't worried. They just wanted another chance to pressure me. So instead of responding, I flipped the script. If my family thought they could manipulate me through pressure, I was going to apply some pressure of my own. First, I went on social media. I made a simple post, nothing dramatic, nothing directly calling them out. Just a picture of my new house with a caption, "Finally home." Worked hard for this, and it's all mine. The reaction was immediate. Friends and extended family flooded the comments, congratulating me, telling me how much I deserved it. And then the real fun began. Ethan didn't comment, but I knew he saw it, because a few hours later I got another text. This one wasn't polite. He unloaded on me. How could you humiliate me like this? You know my friends saw that post, right? They're asking why I am not getting a house when you can afford one. I almost laughed. His real problem wasn't that I had bought a house. It was that I had bought one for myself. Then the phone rang. This time, it was my dad. No more fake concern. No more were family speeches. He was angry. You're embarrassing us, he snapped. Do you even realize how ungrateful you're being? I let him rant. Let him call me selfish, ungrateful. And then, when he finally asked, "What are you going to do to fix this?" I gave him a simple answer. Nothing. Silence. Then came the threats. If you don't do the right thing, you can forget about ever being welcome in this family again. I exhaled slowly, kept my voice steady. Sounds like a win-win to me. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty for standing my ground. I didn't feel like I owed them anything, because the truth was I didn't. I blocked Ethan's number, muted my parents' calls. Then I ordered takeout from my favorite barbecue joint, cracked open a cold beer, and sat on my own porch, watching the sunset over my own property. For the first time in years, I was truly free. The silence didn't last long. By the next morning, my inbox was flooded with even more messages. Ethan had gone into full meltdown mode. My parents had shifted into damage control. Apparently, some extended family had seen my post and started asking questions. And the last thing my parents wanted was for people outside their little bubble to realize how messed up this situation really was. I could picture it perfectly. My mom frantically spinning the story so she didn't look bad. My dad grumbling about family duty and how I had betrayed them. And Ethan? Well, Ethan had gone nuclear. Not only was he ranting in the family group chat, but he had also taken it to social media. I scrolled through his latest posts. Long, dramatic captions about how hard his life was, how he had been betrayed by those closest to him, And then I saw something that almost made me choke on my coffee. He had started a GoFundMe. That's right, he had actually created a crowdfunding campaign. Help Ethan get the home he deserves. The audacity was almost impressive. The description, even better. He painted himself as the struggling brother whose cold-hearted sister had refused to help him in his time of need. Conveniently left out the part where he had expected a free house. I checked the donations. $20. Probably from one of his equally entitled friends. I had to admit I was a little disappointed. If you're going to commit to a scam, at least make it believable. Still, I wasn't about to let this spiral even further. I had no interest in turning this into an online family feud, but I also wasn't about to let them drag my name through the mud. So I decided to drop one last bomb. I made a new post. This time, I included some receipts. Actual screenshots of Ethan's messages, the ones where he openly admitted to planning with my parents to pressure me into giving him my house. No commentary, no drama, just the screenshots and a simple caption, clearing up some misunderstandings. And the internet did the rest. Within hours, people started calling him out. Friends who had blindly supported him before suddenly went silent. Some even turned on him, realizing they'd been manipulated. Ethan deleted his GoFundMe, locked his social media accounts. And my parents? Well, they weren't handling the heat well either. Apparently, some extended family members had reached out to ask why they thought it was okay to demand a house from me while coddling Ethan. By the end of the day, the family group chat was dead silent. No more guilt-tripping messages. No more. We need to talk texts. Just silence. And it was glorious. I leaned back on my porch, the cool evening breeze brushing against my skin. For the first time in forever, my phone wasn't a source of anxiety. I had a cold drink in my hand, my favorite playlist in the background, and for once, I wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop. I wasn't worried about what my family thought. I wasn't wondering if I had done the right thing. I had done the right thing for me, and that was enough. For an entire week, my phone was blissfully silent. No calls, no texts, no guilt-tripping messages. I should have known it wouldn't last. The peace shattered when a thick envelope arrived in the mail certified, with my parents' return address. I sat at my kitchen table, coffee in one hand, letter opener in the other, already bracing for whatever nonsense they had cooked up this time. Inside was a legal notice. I read it once, then again. Then I laughed. My parents were threatening to sue me. According to the document, I had misled them into believing I was purchasing the home for the benefit of the family and had unjustly enriched myself at their expense. The best part? They were demanding financial compensation for the emotional distress I had caused Ethan. That's right. Ethan was so distraught over not getting a free house that they thought he deserved money. I shook my head, picked up my phone, and called my lawyer. Do I need to take this seriously? I could practically hear him holding back laughter. This case has zero chance of holding up in court. At best, it's a scare tactic. At worst, a desperate attempt to manipulate you into caving. Either way, I wasn't worried, but I also wasn't letting it slide. If they wanted to escalate things, I was going to escalate right back. I made a few calls. One to my bank, just to triple check that everything was locked down. Another to a locksmith to reinforce my home security. And then I did the one thing I knew would push them over the edge. I sent my parents a certified letter in return. A simple notice. Any further harassment will result in legal action. 2 days later, the phone calls resumed. First my mom, then my dad, then Ethan. I ignored them all. They left voicemails, some apologetic, some angry. My mom's was the best. She went from sobbing to furious within a single message. How could you turn your back on your family over something as small as a house? Small? The irony nearly knocked me over. If it was so small, why were they willing to take me to court over it? Finally, on the third day, I picked up when my dad called. He skipped the pleasantries. Rachel, let's be adults about this. Oh, now they wanted to be adults. He got straight to the point. We'll drop everything if you just agree to work something out with Ethan. I kept my voice steady. There's nothing to work out. That was the last straw. He exploded. A full-on rant about how selfish I was, how I had betrayed the family, how no daughter of his would ever treat her family this way. It was the same speech I had heard a dozen times before, only this time I felt nothing. I let him talk, and when he finally ran out of steam, I calmly told him, I have nothing left to say. I hope you and Mom can move on. And then I hung up, and that was it. No more threats. No more guilt trips. No more trying to force me into submission. For the first time, my parents finally understood that I wasn't giving in. And Ethan? He went radio silent. Either he realized he wasn't getting anything from me, or he had found another target to latch onto. Either way, I was free. The first few weeks of freedom felt strange. I had spent so long waiting for the next round of manipulation that I didn't know what to do with the silence. My house actually felt like a home now. Not a battlefield. Not something I had to defend, just mine. For the first time in years, I could actually focus on myself. I got into a solid routine. Waking up early, hitting the gym, cooking real meals instead of grabbing fast food on the go. I had time to enjoy the little things, sitting on my porch with a cup of coffee, watching the world wake up without worrying about what my family would demand from me next. It was the kind of peace I never realized I needed. But of course, peace never lasts forever. One afternoon while working from home, I heard a knock at the door. My gut told me exactly who it was before I even looked. Sure enough, Ethan. He stood on my porch, looking less like the entitled older brother I grew up with, and more like a salesman on his last chance to close a deal. The confidence was gone, replaced with something that almost looked like desperation. Almost. I didn't let him in. Instead, I stepped outside, arms crossed, waiting. He started with small talk, awkward, forced. Then came the real reason he was here. I've been thinking, and maybe I was a little unfair. I raised an eyebrow. I get it now, he continued. I wasn't entitled to the house. I'm not asking for that anymore. I just need a place to stay, just for a little while. I almost laughed. A little while? Right? And then what? I let him move in, and suddenly I'm paying his bills while he lounges on my couch, complaining about how unfair life is. Not a chance. I kept my response simple. Mom and Dad bent over backward for you. Why not stay with them? And that's when the real truth slipped out. He wasn't welcome there anymore. Apparently, after everything that went down, our parents' reputation took a hit. Relatives who used to enable their behavior weren't so quick to take their side. Even some of Ethan's friends had distanced themselves. Turns out when you go viral for trying to scam your own sister, people don't exactly want to be associated with you. Ethan wasn't just looking for a place to crash. He was looking for an escape from the mess he had created. I didn't take the bait. I'm not playing that role anymore, I told him. No hard feelings, but your problems aren't mine to fix. The second the words left my mouth, his expression changed. The fake humility dropped, replaced with the same old bitterness. Wow, guess family really doesn't mean anything to you, huh? I just shrugged. He left in a huff, making a dramatic exit that might have worked when we were kids. But all I felt was relief. A few days later, I ran into him at the mall. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but when your brother's voice carries like a megaphone, it's hard not to. He was complaining loudly to someone at a nearby table. I actually have to work now, like a regular person. Do you know how exhausting that is? I bit my lip to keep from laughing. It was too good. Instead of saying anything, I grabbed my coffee and walked past him. He didn't even notice me. And you know what? That was fine by me. Later that night, my mom sent one last text. A last-ditch effort to guilt me into reconsidering. I just can't believe how cold you've become. I ignored it. I wasn't cold. I was just done. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel the need to explain myself to anyone. Story 2. Hey everyone, my name's Sophie. And if you've got a minute, I've got a story that's a real roller coaster one that dives deep into love, betrayal, and learning the hard way who really has your back. Let's rewind a bit so you can get the full picture. I was born into what people might call privilege, but I was never the spoiled, trust fund type. My dad built a thriving auto additives business from the ground up, turning a niche into an empire. And my mom? She was just as much of a powerhouse, creating a high-end salon chain that became the go-to for beauty and style. They divorced when I was 19, but it was surprisingly drama-free. They split everything evenly and remained on good terms. My dad stayed single, married to his work, while my mom eventually remarried but kept things simple. No new siblings, just me. Then came Ethan, my husband, or, as I've come to think of him, the person who flipped my world upside down. We got married fresh out of college, me with a degree in music education, him working in sales. Things were good, simple, happy. I started teaching music to kids, and though it wasn't a lucrative job, it was fulfilling. Ethan's salary wasn't huge either, but we made do. Then I got pregnant, and that's when things started to shift. One lazy Sunday, I was curled up on the couch, enjoying my tea, when Ethan, with his feet up and a casual air, dropped a bomb. Babe, why don't you quit your job? Stay home with the baby. We'll manage. I nearly choked. Quit my job? Ethan, we can't afford that. Plus, I love teaching. He waved a hand like I was overreacting. Come on, Soph. It's not like we're scraping by. Your dad's loaded one little boost from him, and we're golden. I stared at him, trying to process what he was actually suggesting. That's not the point. We agreed to live within our means, remember? He shrugged, clearly unbothered. But what really made my blood boil was what happened later that night at dinner with his parents. We were sitting around his folks' tiny dining table, eating overcooked chicken, when Ethan casually threw me under the bus. Sophie's thinking about taking some time off work, with the baby coming. His mother, Linda, ever the opportunist, lit up. Oh, that's wonderful. With Sophie's family, you two won't have to worry about a thing. I gripped my fork a little tighter. Actually, we haven't decided anything, and we intend to manage on our own. Ethan's dad, Greg, chuckled like I was the silly one. Why struggle, sweetheart? A little help from your folks, and you could be living the good life. I could feel my face heating up. This wasn't just a one-off comment, it was an entire mindset. They saw my family's money as a resource to tap into, a safety net they felt entitled to. And Ethan? He just sat there, nodding along like it was all perfectly reasonable. That night, lying in bed, I tried to make sense of what had happened. Ethan, do you really think we should be relying on my parents like that? He turned to me, his face calm, almost patronizing. It's not about need, Soph. It's about what makes sense. Your parents can afford it, and we deserve a break. Why not take it? That word deserve stuck with me. It echoed in my mind long after he had fallen asleep beside me. Was this the person I married? Had he always thought like this, and I just never noticed? I wanted to believe it was just a misunderstanding, a passing moment of poor judgment. But I was wrong. Oh, so wrong. If I thought Ethan's attitude was bad, his parents were about to take things to a whole new level. One evening, we were in our small, rented apartment when Greg, with all the subtlety of a used car salesman, started in on his latest scheme. So, Sophie, he said, leaning forward, his eyes gleaming with something that made my stomach twist. I've got this incredible business opportunity. Just need a small investment to get it off the ground. Linda jumped in, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. With your family's resources, I bet you could easily help us out. It's such a sure thing. I kept my tone even, but my patience was wearing thin. Greg, Linda, we've talked about this before. My parents' money isn't part of our finances, but Greg wasn't about to back down. Come on, it's just a few thousand. Your dad probably spends that on golf in a weekend. The audacity floored me. They were sitting in my home, eating my food, and acting like my parents' hard-earned money was just there for the taking. Ethan, as always, tried to smooth things over. Babe, maybe they have a point. It's just a loan, right? I turned to him, completely incredulous. Ethan, when did we decide it was our job to bankroll your parents' dreams? Silence. Then Linda sighed dramatically. Well, I never. We thought family helped each other out, but if you're going to be stingy, that was it, I snapped. Working for what you have isn't being stingy, Linda. It's called being responsible. Maybe you should try it sometime. Greg tried to laugh it off, but the message was clear. I wasn't budging. That night after they left, Ethan tried his usual damage control. They didn't mean anything by it, Soph. They just see things differently. I exhaled slowly, trying to shake off the lingering anger. No, Ethan. They see me as a walking ATM, and you don't seem to have a problem with that. For the first time, I saw something flicker in his expression. Guilt? Maybe, but not enough to change anything. And the worst part? Things were only just getting started. When our daughter, Lily, was born, I foolishly thought that having a grandchild might bring out the best in Ethan's family. Instead, it just gave them a new angle to exploit. They showed up at the hospital with the cheapest onesie they could find, the clearance sticker still attached. Meanwhile, my parents arrived with a beautiful hand-knit blanket and high-quality baby gear. Linda scoffed at the sight of it. Wow, really laying it on thick, huh? Must be nice to just throw money around. Ethan chuckled, nodding along. Yeah, Mom's got a point, Soph. Maybe they should have just bought us a house instead. My heart sank. I was holding our newborn daughter, overwhelmed with love, and all they could think about was how much money my parents should be spending on us. A few weeks later, during another unsolicited visit, Linda eyed the expensive stroller my mom had gifted us and smirked. Must be nice having parents who spoil their grandchild. Though a contribution to a house fund would have been more useful, don't you think? Ethan nodded. Actually, babe, we've been talking maybe your parents could help us out with a down payment. I was floored. Not only were his parents relentless, but now Ethan was fully on board. That was the moment I realized this wasn't love. This was a transaction, and I was the currency. And I was done playing their game. By the time Lily was a few months old, it was crystal clear Ethan and his family saw me as nothing more than a walking, talking ATM. Every conversation, every little comment somehow circled back to money, my money, or more accurately, my parents' money, and things only got worse from there. It started with little jabs. Linda would eye our secondhand furniture and sigh dramatically. You know, with your family's wealth, you could at least get something nice. What if guests come over? Greg would nod along. Yeah, a bigger place would make more sense. Maybe something with a pool? I'm sure your dad wouldn't even notice the money missing. Even Ethan started throwing in comments here and there. Babe, your parents could set us up so easily. I don't get why you're making life harder for us. I tried reasoning with him. Because, Ethan, it's not our money. My dad worked his ass off for that. My mom too. We agreed to live within our means. Remember? But he didn't want to remember. He wanted the easy life. And when my mom died suddenly in an accident, any tiny sliver of doubt I had about Ethan's true motives vanished completely. Losing my mom shattered me. She was my rock, my biggest supporter, the person who always had my back no matter what. I was drowning in grief, barely keeping it together for Lily's sake. Ethan, his first question wasn't, "Are you okay?" or "How can I help?" No, it was, "So, how much are you getting from her will?" I remember just staring at him, my mind refusing to process what he'd just said. "Are you serious right now?" He blinked at me like I was the one being weird. "Babe, I'm just saying your mom was successful. You're her only kid. This could be life-changing for us." Life-changing, like my mom's death was some kind of jackpot. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to make him feel even a fraction of the pain I was feeling. But instead, I just walked away, because at that moment, I knew our marriage was over. According to my mom's will, I inherited her entire salon chain. And let me be honest, I had no idea what to do with it. I was a music teacher, not a businesswoman. But Ethan? Oh, he suddenly became very interested in business. "Babe, let me handle it," he said, all confidence and charm. "You know I've got a knack for this stuff." Did he? Because last I checked, selling office supplies didn't make you an expert in running a beauty empire. But I was too lost in grief to argue. I let him take the reins, but only on the condition that the business stayed in my name. And thank God I did, because barely a year later, my dad passed away from a heart attack. 2 parents gone in the span of a year. I was wrecked, completely hollow. And instead of comforting me, Ethan and his parents saw an opportunity. The very day after my dad died, Greg and Linda showed up at my house, fake sympathy plastered all over their faces. Greg barely waited for me to sit down before blurting out, "So, Sophie, your dad must have left you a hefty sum, huh?" I saw red. "Can you not?" My voice was sharper than I intended, but I didn't care. "My dad isn't even buried yet, and you're already talking about his money?" Linda huffed, looking deeply offended. "Well, excuse us for thinking about the family's future." Ethan, ever the peacemaker, tried to smooth things over. "Babe, it's a big deal. We just want to make sure we're making smart decisions." I stared at him, my stomach turning. "A big deal?" "My parents are gone, Ethan, and all you can think about is cashing in." The room fell silent. That was the moment I saw them for who they really were. Not family, not people who cared about me, just leeches. 2 days later, Ethan came home earlier than usual, practically bouncing with excitement. "Babe, you're gonna love this. I struck a deal to sell the salons." I nearly dropped the glass I was holding. "You did what?" Before I could even process that, his parents waltzed in like they owned the place. Greg grinned. "We've sold the condo and put down a deposit on a beach house. We're all moving to the coast." I just stared at them. "Excuse me?" Linda waved a hand, brushing off my shock. "Oh, don't worry about the details. We also booked a cruise. You should come, it'll be fabulous." My heart pounded. "Where's all this money coming from?" Linda beamed. "Well, darling, with your father's passing and the salon sale, money's no object. We're set for life." And that's when it all clicked. They weren't just leeches. They were parasites. And Ethan, he was their willing accomplice. I took a deep breath, forcing my voice to stay calm. "Ethan, show me the financials for the salon. Now." He hesitated. "Babe, why are you being like this? It's all about our future, no. I cut him off, my voice ice cold. Show me the financials. His parents chimed in, still trying to manipulate me. Sweetheart, just think about the luxury. Why waste time on some little salons? That was the final straw. I want you all out. Ethan looked stunned. Sophie, come on, no. I was done. This is my inheritance, my decision. And you and your parents, you don't get a say. The air turned thick with tension. Greg and Linda had the audacity to look offended, but I didn't care. For the first time in years, I felt clear-headed. They thought I was weak, that I'd roll over and let them take everything. They were wrong, and I was about to show them just how wrong they were. So for the next few weeks, I had everything audited. And guess what? Ethan had run my mom's business into the ground. The salons were barely holding on, and if I hadn't stepped in when I did, they would have been bankrupt within months. So I did what I should have done a long time ago. I hired a real manager to fix the mess Ethan made. I cut Greg and Linda completely out of my life, and I sat Ethan down with a stack of divorce papers. His face went pale. Sophie, babe, we can work this out. No, Ethan, we can't. You and your parents have bled me dry for years. I'm done. He opened his mouth, but I didn't give him the chance. And another thing, you're paying back every penny you cost the salons. Every single one, Linda gasped. You can't do that. I met her gaze, my voice steady. Watch me. For the first time in years, I wasn't scared. I was in control. And I wasn't ever letting them take advantage of me again. Ethan must have thought I was bluffing. Maybe he believed I was too emotional, too grief-stricken, too soft to go through with it. But I wasn't bluffing. I was done. The divorce papers were just the beginning. At first, Ethan tried to play the remorseful husband. Sophie, come on, he pleaded, sitting across from me at the kitchen table, the same table where we'd once planned our future. I screwed up, I know that, but we can fix this. I tilted my head, studying him. He wasn't sorry, not really. He was just panicking because he realized his gravy train was leaving the station. No, I can fix this, I said, my voice cold, and I will, without you. That's when he dropped the act. His whole demeanor shifted, and he scoffed. Wow, so that's it, huh? You're really throwing away everything over some money? I almost laughed. Money? This was never about money, Ethan, I said. This was about respect, something you and your parents never gave me. For the first time, he didn't have a slick response. He just sat there, his jaw tightening as he realized I wasn't budging. And when reality finally hit, he got angry. You owe me, he snapped. I gave up my career for you, for our family, and now you're just what? Leaving me with nothing? I leaned forward, lowering my voice. You didn't give up anything, Ethan. You tried to cash in on me. And guess what? The bank is closed. He stormed out after that, slamming the door so hard. Lily woke up crying. I scooped her into my arms, whispering soothing words, and right then, I made a silent promise to her. We were going to be okay. Better than okay. We were going to be free. The divorce proceedings weren't quick, but they were satisfying. See, Ethan and his parents had been so focused on taking my money that they never considered what would happen if I fought back. Turns out, when you have solid receipts of someone bleeding a business dry, the courts don't look too kindly on that. Ethan was ordered to pay back every penny he had mismanaged from my mom's salon chain. And since he didn't have the money, guess what? He had to sell his share of our old apartment to cover the damages. Greg and Linda were furious. They had already blown through their savings thinking they'd be living the high life. And now, they had nothing. No luxury beach house, no cruise, no endless stream of cash from their son's rich wife. It was delicious. And then, just when I thought they'd finally learned their lesson, my phone rang one evening. It was Linda. Sophie, sweetheart, she cooed, like we were best friends. I know things have been tense, but we need a little help buying a new place. Just something small. Any amount would help. I almost choked on my tea. She really had the audacity. I took a deep breath, let the silence stretch just long enough for her to squirm, then said, You made your bed, Linda. Now lie in it. And I hung up. Best feeling ever. Once Ethan and his family were officially out of my life, things started looking up. It wasn't easy, but I threw myself into rebuilding my mom's salon chain. I rehired the talented stylists Ethan had stupidly let go, brought back the quality and reputation that made the business thrive in the first place. And after months of nonstop work, it finally happened. Profits started booming. Turns out, I was way more capable of running a business than I ever gave myself credit for. As for my dad's auto additives company, that was a whole different beast, but I wasn't about to let that slip away either. I hired a manager to run the day-to-day while I took my time learning the ropes. "This is yours for now," I told him in our first meeting. "But keep me in the loop. One day, I might take the reins myself, and maybe, just maybe, when Lily was older, if she wanted it, I'd pass it down to her. I wasn't going to force anything. I just wanted her to have options. Unlike me, she would never feel trapped in a marriage or obligated to make herself small for someone else's comfort." With everything settled, I sold the apartment Ethan and I once shared. The money was enough for a real fresh start. A small, cozy house with a backyard just big enough for Lily to run around in. It wasn't a mansion. It wasn't flashy, but it was ours. And for the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: peace. One afternoon, as I sat on the back porch, watching Lily chase bubbles in the yard, she ran up to me, giggling. "Mommy, when I grow up, I want to be just like you," she declared, her tiny hands on her hips. I smiled, pulling her into my arms. "You're going to be even more amazing, baby." And I meant it. Because we weren't just surviving anymore, we were thriving. Together, just me and her. And nothing was ever going to take that away from us again.